Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hello there, and you are very welcome to today's episode with me, Shane Craddock. We are going to be talking today about a distinction that I think is very important if you're interested in creating a better life for yourself in every aspect. So it's the distinction between hard work and elevated ambition. That's what I'm calling it anyway. Now, when you think of ambition, do you picture what do you picture? Do you picture like long hours, hustle, constant striving, tension, pressure, work? Is that the model that you have in your mind for ambition? And I wonder, would you be open to considering a different definition, that maybe there's an elevated ambition that doesn't have to be about working harder? And that's what I want to explore today, and perhaps challenge the myth that ambition has to equal hard, tiring work. And maybe at least consider that a different definition, elevated ambition, could be a quiet force that literally transform your life without burning you out. And I think we're in a position in the world right now where that is a very important question. I think that the opportunity also with the advent of AI and other converging technologies over the next decade, for me, I think is going to bring huge opportunities to be less stressed, to work less in terms of hours, and to achieve a huge amount more, not just in terms of money or your career, but in particular around your health, your creativity, your relationships, your ability to enjoy life. At least, isn't that what's most important? Like, what's the point of working so hard to not be able to enjoy life? Yet that is a problem for most people. And for me, I suppose, certainly I would have confused the two for a long time, hard work and ambition. And I can still sometimes catch myself doing it. With most people that I work with, certainly at the start, I would see that too, that hard work is equal to ambition. I always remember a definition or something I read somewhere years ago. It said, the only place that work is before success is in the dictionary. Or sorry, it's the other way around. The only place success is before work is in the dictionary. But most people then will say hard work, that there's kind of almost a belief that you have to hustle, you have to grind, you have to almost burn yourself out, work all the hours that God gave. But that doesn't seem to be the truth from my experience. Now, I know that there are many hardworking people who aren't really ambitious for their lives. In a way, without realizing it, they've allowed themselves to be so busy that they've compromised their ambition or what's really actually possible for them. And I also know a small percentage of people who you would say are very ambitious and they can achieve extraordinary things without having to work every hour of the week. And it's not just about having money so they can get other people to do it or do the work. I mean, that helps. But it's more about actually understanding, in many ways, I suppose, what's the most important areas that you can focus your time. Now, it helps that it usually is having some sort of inspiring, what I would call 360-degree vision that allows you to filter backwards from your ideal future. It definitely helps. And in that kind of way, elevated ambition, in a way, is about having that kind of 360 inspired vision, and that helps with your clarity. And then most importantly, what to focus on and what not to focus on, because it's really important to be able to understand what to say yes to, and maybe more importantly, to say, well, what do I say no to? Otherwise, you can be just working forever, saying yes to everything and not really going anywhere. Now, obviously, this is the inner edge, so we talk about it from an inner aspect. So just to make sure, just in case you're new to some of this, from my perspective, you have an inner world. I think that's universal truth, that you're in there, stuff is happening inside you, your feelings, your emotions, your thinking, your beliefs, and what's going on inside you really determines at the highest level what actually happens in reality and your experience of life. And when it comes to your ambition or your sense of what's even possible, It's very important because your self-image, your beliefs, if you don't understand the nature of those, they will get in the way. Sometimes that's a good thing, but for most people, there's areas in their life where they're probably compromising what they can actually achieve, and they don't realize it. So a great question for you to consider is, like, for example, what's the best you could imagine in the key areas of your life? Health, relationships, money, maybe behavior change, travel, work, or just your ability to be present, to enjoy life, to have a high sense of purpose and fulfillment. Can you even imagine that? Now, people might say, well, I can imagine it, Shane, but I just don't know how to do it, or perhaps I don't really believe I can do it, or yeah, my mind gets in the way and I kind of sabotage myself. So your mind can actually shut it down. And this is where I'm always repeating myself, I guess, about being the leader of your mind, the inner CEO. Now, I've been playing around with this myself in terms of just considering this before this podcast, and I kind of came up with something new in terms of some playful descriptions of people. So, for example, we think about somebody who's a hard worker, but maybe without an elevated ambition or without going for the impossible. I would call them the aimless busy bee. So they're good workers, but they're aimless. They're not really going to create major transformation in their life. They might be a steady pair of hands just to get stuff done, and you can be really, really busy. And I think a lot of people can be like that without realizing it, especially if you don't have a clear vision. So you can stay busy, but ultimately you'll never probably feel fulfilled, and you will probably never achieve your potential. Then you have probably what's more common in my world, which is the overworked achiever. That probably says enough. But somebody who actually has got high ambition, but they work all the hours that God gave, and they keep themselves too busy. There's no space for nothing. There's no space for space. And then maybe the one that you want to consider perhaps is, and this is entirely possible, it's what I'm most interested in, is the effortless achiever. So somebody who can have really high ambition for all aspects of their life, but not overwork, not be a slave to workaholism. So somebody who's very clear about what's most important, a vision that inspires them, somebody who probably has learned how to delegate effectively. And also they've focused out, they've really zoned in on the 80-20 rule and gone very refined on it and say, well, what's the few things that matter most? I'm going to preserve energy to focus on those things. And that is, I suppose, an inner clarity skill. And again, just to make the point that elevated ambition is about the impact of your actions. It's not about the amount of effort you exert. Now, certainly from my point of view in my life, unconsciously, I had accepted the belief that, okay, to succeed, you must work hard. And for sure, you obviously have to work to achieve your success, but working hard, that's a different thing. It took me many years, probably going through a breakdown and then maybe multiple events in my life where you realize, hang on a second here, I could have achieved a lot of that without overworking. Now, there's a famous quote, or certainly it's kind of a story about this lazy officer. And I had done a little bit of research when I was researching for this. And it came down to this guy called General Friar von Hammerstein-Equord. I'm probably saying that wrong. Who at one point was the chief of the German army back, and I think, well, this is going back probably over 100 years ago. And he had the method of selecting officers, which was quite unusual, very original. And this is kind of what I found about it, which was reported in the Berlin newspaper. He said, I divide my officers into 4 classes as follows: the clever, the industrious, the lazy, and the stupid. Each officer always possesses 2 of these qualities. Those who are clever and industrious, I appoint to the general staff. Under certain circumstances, you can make use of people who are stupid and lazy, but the man who's clever and lazy qualifies for the highest leadership posts. He has the requisite nerves and the mental clarity for difficult decisions. So the man who's clever and lazy, he rated the highest in terms of potential in the army. And then he said, but whoever is stupid and industrious must be gotten rid of, for he is too dangerous. Interesting. So somebody who's stupid but very industrious, a hard worker, they can cause damage. So he actually rated them the lowest, and the guy who's stupid and lazy, he rated above them. But again, the highest was being clever and lazy. Interesting. So again, for me, as I'll say to my clients, look, it's about results. It's not about time. It's not about effort. It's not about grind. It's not about hustle. It's about results. So if you're smart enough to use your brain and your mind, which is the ultimate machine in the world, way faster and better than ChatGPT or anything to come. Your mind is unbelievable if you understand its potential and how to access it. But once you do, then it's like, okay, take the limits off your mind. What can you create? What can you bring in? And I think it's important to consider almost, I don't know, maybe the metaphor of a lighthouse, that like once you have clear focus where the light is shining, it can kind of guide you, I guess, away from the rocks and maybe more towards where you want to go, the promised land, perhaps. But most people, when I first meet them, especially business leaders, people who I would have high respect for, great high achievers, can really make the impossible happen, which is I love to help them do. But generally what you find at the start is that they actually they don't have an elevated ambition. They have a very inspiring, perhaps exciting one, but it's not elevated. What's elevated? Well, at the very center, it should include yourself. They've made the false assumption that when they get to the promised land, their vision, that they will feel a certain way. And they haven't actually included themselves to consider, well, actually, when I get there, I want to be healthy. I want to have good relationships. They're generally focused on money. They're generally focused on rewards or something like selling a business or achieving a vision for the business. But without realizing it, their vision isn't holistic. It's not 360 degrees to include their health, their state of mind, their relationships. And weirdly, they don't include themselves. They just assume when they get what they want, they'll feel a certain way, but actually they miss the journey, the value of it, if that makes any sense. So it's worth considering for yourself, where could you reduce your work, your hard work, or are you confusing busyness with actual meaningful progress? What would it look like if your elevated ambition guided your actions instead of just working harder? And maybe another one is, where in your life are you putting in effort without perhaps a clear purpose or an outcome or an elevated ambition? And I wonder, how big are you allowing yourself to dream and think, or are you curtailed by your mind? But if you've listened to me in these podcasts, you'll know that I am very clear that I am not my mind. So I don't want to be limited by what it thinks. And what would you love to create over your lifetime? Like, what a great question to consider. What would be the best you could imagine over your lifetime? So a couple of extra tips to come, but just before that, a little mini plug for something I'm doing. If any of what I'm saying here is of interest to you, consider joining me in my new program. It's a live workshop series called Limitless 2025, where you will be challenged to consider an elevated ambition for your lifetime, to stretch your mind, to reconsider how you're using your time, to reconsider what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. It'll be very much about inner work as we come into the end of this year. So here's a thought experiment for you. Something that I probably will lean into a little bit in Limitless is, pretend you had 5 times more confidence in your ability to create things, to make things happen. Like, what would you imagine yourself doing? That's an example of taking an elevated ambition. Or how would you like to be? And what would you like to have? As a thought experiment. And even if you can clarify some of that, then you can work backwards and say, well, okay, well, what would be the 20% in the 80-20 rule, the 20% that actually would really make the difference? And then over the next month, what could you let go of, say no to allow space to bring in time for those 20%? And just to close out, and by the way, Limitless, any details if you're interested, they'll be in the show notes. There's a link there somewhere. But just to close out with the bumper sticker statement, for me, true ambition, elevated ambition, can be a quiet force. It doesn't have to be loud. It can be very quiet. And ultimately, it's not about doing more and working longer hours, but it's more about doing what matters most to you. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.